we also got a sort of lamp up here. Now to sort of orbit around in our 3D view, I'm going to use the middle mouse button to orbit around. Shift middle mouse will allow you to sort of pan across. Okay, and if you want to zoom in, you can use your wheel if you have one on your middle mouse button, or you can use Shift Control Shift with the middle mouse button, and you can move in and out. Okay, so let's start with a different piece of geometry. So we've got a simple cube. To delete our cube, we can hit delete, or we can hit X. Say OK to delete that. Now let's bring in a cylinder shape. Now to do that, we're going to come over here to the left. We're going to go to Create, and then you'll see there are a bunch of different meshes here that we can use. So let's go ahead and create a cylinder. Now you'll see right down here we have the ability to come in and change, and where it says vertices, that's kind of the resolution going around. So depending on what yours is, I'm going to set mine to 16. Yours is probably set up to maybe 32 or so. So you can see how we can increase that and make it a lot smoother. But you want to have fewer points in this case because we want to be able to manipulate it and not have to worry about all of those points. So you can change that. We can also take the radius down a little bit. Okay. The depth will allow you to change sort of the height of it, so we can make it a little bit longer. Okay. For the cap fill, this is the cap here and on the bottom, and this kind of determines the kinds of polygons that it uses to fill the cap. If you choose nothing, it's going to leave that open. Okay, let's choose N-gon, and what that's going to do is it's going to just leave this as one big piece of geometry and not create all the triangles. So that's what we want in this case. We're not going to leave it like that. Now we also can come down here to rotation, and you can see we can rotate it in different axes. So I'm going to set the Y rotation to 90 degrees, so it's sort of laying on its side. Okay, now we're in object mode right now, so we could move our object around just by clicking and dragging on the object. Okay, we can also, if we right click, we can move it, and then if we right click again, it'll actually pop back, or we can left click to place it. I'm going to leave it right at the center though, and I want to add a little bit more resolution. So to do that, we need to go from object mode into edit mode. Okay, so you can see here, there we can access that. We can also hit the tab key to go back and forth. So with edit mode, you can see that right now we have a bunch of stuff selected. You can tell what you're selecting down here by using this filter. So we've got points, edges, and faces. If you hit the A key, it'll either select everything or deselect everything. So you can see I've got everything now deselected. And this shows you the actual resolution, which we don't have a lot of points there. So let's say we want to add some points. Well, we can use Control R to do that, but let's show you what that actually does. So we're going to go to our faces, and you can see the little dots come up here. Let's go to Tools, and we want to activate Loop Cut and Slide. So you can hit this button, or you can hit Control R, and you can see it gives you a little preview line right in the center. So if I click that once, that'll allow me to drag it across and place it. Okay, so maybe I want to put one right in here. Now if I do that again, Control R, and instead of clicking, I use my scroll wheel, I can change the number. So if I want to put in a few more, I can go ahead and do that. Now it lets me move those around, and now I've got those lines added in. Now what we can do is start to move these around, okay, and reshape things. So I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Q, and we can come into the front view here. And I want to turn on Wireframe. Okay, so I can display it as a wire, and I want to select the points. I'll hit A to deselect, and now I want to be able to select all the way around, like a lasso select. So let me zoom in here. So I'm going to use Control left mouse button with Wireframe on, and you can see that selects the entire loop there. So at this point, let's do some shaping on this. So hit S, and then drag your mouse to scale and click when you're ready. And then I'll drop everything by hitting A, and then Control left mouse button to select the next one. S will allow you to quickly scale. A to drop everything, and we'll just do the whole thing here like that. And we'll kind of give it a little bit of a taper. So Control, drag around. We'll just kind of taper this down a bit. And as we go through this process, don't feel like you have to make it look exactly like what I'm doing. Have a little fun with it and really customize it for what you want it to look like. Okay, the main thing is that kind of getting an idea of how to go through this process from start to finish. You can also come in here and move things around. You can see right down here we can move, rotate, or scale in addition to hitting those buttons. G will also allow you to move things around like that. Or we can just grab this and move it up. So let's move this up. I'm going to grab that and kind of move it up. And I want part of this guy to be sort of sitting on the ground. And so we'll kind of take this up a little bit. Kind of move that back a bit. You can kind of look around and see what that looks like. Now I want this to be sort of on the ground. And so let's take this whole loop and kind of move that down. We'll do the same thing here. Can maybe scale it down a little bit more even. And let's pull this down a little bit too. Now we missed one kind of up here. So let's kind of move that over a little bit. Okay, so we get something kind of like that. So let's go ahead in the next lesson and take a look at blocking in or completing the tail, and also start this out a little bit more. So we want to make sure that we're able to select faces. Now if we're selecting single elements here, so a single point or a few points, but we don't want to do the control and do the lasso select. If we select this way, we're going to be selecting with the right mouse button. Same thing in object mode. To select objects, we're going to select them with the right mouse button, which is a little bit different if you've worked in other applications. But in this case, we'll go ahead and we'll select this end cap here. We can hit S if we want to kind of scale this down a little bit more. If we want to extrude this out, there's a few things we can do. So you can see that there are several extrudes right over here. If we click on this, you can see that there are several kinds of extrudes that we can do. Also here, extrude region, extrude individual, and so forth. We can also hit E to simply extrude that out, and S will allow us to kind of scale it down. If we hit Alt-E, that'll bring up these options, and so we can extrude a region or individual faces, so forth. But for this, it works well because it's just a single N-gon, and so we can kind of move this out, S to kind of scale it down a little bit. Now, to close it off, we really don't want to have an N-gon in our final product, and so what we'd really like to do is kind of draw some new edges across here. So let's hit A to drop that selection. And this is going to be the knife tool. And so if you see here, there's a knife right over here on the left. We can also activate that by hitting K. And then we can come up here, and I'm just going to draw across from one side all the way to the other, to those points. Okay. Try that again here. There we go. I just hit enter. And now let's take a look at the other kind of lines that we have here. So I want to draw down, I think, from the top to the bottom. So again, we'll hit K. Now we don't have to stop here, although you can, but we can just go ahead and come all the way across, and it'll automatically add that point in the middle. Now we still have several N-gons, so we can decide how to deal with those. Let's come all the way across in this way. And we'll do the same thing here. And then we can come from the top all the way down, crossing all of those, and you can see it automatically adds those in. And we'll do the same thing down here. Now we can select those polygons in the center and kind of move those out a little bit. Let's select this point, move it out, And then we can select these corners. And I'm just going to move those back a bit. Okay, and let's do the same thing right here on these. Just to kind of round things off a little. So that helps us close in that back. Now on the front, we can do the same thing here. So we'll select the face here, and we can kind of get it into position if we want to kind of scale it down a little bit. Hit E to extrude that forward a little. And we can kind of think about the shape. So we're going to have these sort of arms coming off. So at this point, we need to start thinking about how we want the head. So we want to have this sort of open mouth. So we can start to think about that as we create our, or draw out our resolution here. So let's go ahead and get the knife. I'm just going to draw straight across from that point. So something like that. Let's go ahead and draw across here. All the way across. So something like that. And let's do the same thing up here at the top. So we're just kind of taking this N-gon, which made it really easy for us to kind of extrude this out and get us in position. But now we are kind of drawing out these lines so that it's not an N-gon anymore, but kind of a configuration of quads and or triangles. We're going to stay mostly quads, which are these four-sided polygons. Let's go ahead and draw down from the top all the way down to the bottom, making sure that we hit on that point. And then let's do one more, kind of the same thing that we did with the tail. I'll do that, and then do the same thing over here on this side. Okay, now we want to start building out the head, and so let's take these polygons right here, these top two rows. Let's extrude them out. So hit E to kind of pull that out. And let's actually just drop out of that with the A key. Then we'll hit E again and kind of extrude this out. So it gives us kind of a basic structure, not really the shape, but the structure of the head that we want. Okay, so now at this point you can come in and start to select these faces here, kind of pull these out a little bit. And we want to start to round things off. So come in here, I'll pull those back a little. Think about the roundness of it, kind of pull those forward. If you try to come in and select around these, you're not going to get points that aren't visible unless you go into Wireframe. So this will allow you to come in and select points that are kind of all the way through. And let's actually select that and deselect that. Control Shift. And then we can come in and maybe let's go to scale. I'll just scale it out in the Y a little bit. So you just want to add a bit of shape to not only the top, but also the bottom. Okay, so let's do that, and then in the next lesson, we'll come ahead just by moving those points around. What I want to do now is, let's come in and grab these edges inside of the mouth here. Let's kind of move these up a little bit. So we really want this corner of this mouth to be pretty close. Okay, and then we can come in, and I'm just going to grab these points. And you can do this in Wireframe as well, and just grab everything. But let's kind of move this up and in, so get something like that. We can kind of grab these two. And so what I want to do now is kind of create an inside of the mouth. So I want to select those polygons that are just on the inside of this mouth. So right in here. So we've got just those selected. Now, there are more tools that we can use than the ones just listed over here on the left, depending on what we have selected. So if I hit Control F, it'll bring up a bunch of tools that are related to faces. We can also access this by going down to Mesh, right down here, and coming up to Faces, and there's a bunch of stuff that we can do here. The one that I want to concentrate on is Inset Faces. This is kind of like an Extrude, and in some other applications it's included within the Extrude tool, but what's going to allow us to create kind of an edge loop around the selection of faces by insetting them. So we can activate that by hitting the I key as well, and then we just drag, and you can see what's happening here as I pull that in. Now, there are settings over here, and yours may be set to select outer. In that case, it'll select the outer loop. If you want to have the inner faces, basically the original faces selected, you can turn that off. But you can change the values over here as well. Okay. You can also, if you wanted to raise that up, you could change the depth, but I'm going to go ahead and leave the depth at 0. So this is going to allow us to create this sort of lip right around there. So now what we can do is if I just do an extrude, it doesn't really do what I want it to do. So let me undo that. And I want to extrude a region. And I want to do it along the vertex normals. So we can select region vertex normals, or we can hit Alt-E, region vertex normals. And then as I drag out, it's going to actually push that out along those normals, which will give you more of kind of a cavity there. I can kind of pull that back a little bit. And if you want to, you can kind of scale it in, but it just gives you that sort of opening for the inside of the mouth. And we can hit A to drop out of that. And you can see that there. It gives us a little bit of a lip and creates that cavity opening for the mouth. Now at this point, we're starting to get a little bit more detailed. And so one of the things that we can do is actually, if this is a symmetrical model, then we can just work on this symmetrically. So what that means is that we want to delete half of the model so that anything that we do will then be able to copy over, because if we start to create arms and things, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult to create those on both sides. So what we can do is delete half the model. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's come in, and we can just do it from here if we want to. We'll make sure to select faces, and we can go to Wireframe, kind of help a little bit, and then I can just come in and start to drag across there and just make sure that we don't have anything over on the other side. You can hit delete and choose faces, and then you can see we've just got a couple here. You can do this from your different views as well. You can hit X, same thing. And then let's come in and delete the rest of this. So you definitely want to have that line that bisects it down the middle so that you're able to do this. So now we've got just 1/2 of our geometry. In order to add the other half back, or to be able to see the other half, we'll select our cylinder up here in our outliner, and we can click on this, and we'll just call this body to name it. And you see all these little buttons over here will allow us to choose different things. If we choose the wrench, this will allow us to add a modifier. So we can come in here and choose a mirror modifier, and that'll actually mirror the geometry across a particular axis. In this case, we want to mirror it across the y-axis. Okay, we can choose to merge those points. So as long as that modifier is on there, we'll be able to see the other side. And when we come in and let's say select a point here and move it, you can see it updates on the other side. So anything that we do on this side is going to be updated on the other side. So this will allow us to say, okay, I'm just going to select these 3 faces, and I'm going to kind of move those around. And we don't have to worry about selecting anything on the other side because we know it's updating. So we can come in here and kind of soften up the head a little bit. Maybe pull this down a bit. Okay, then something like that. Maybe pull this in a little to kind of soften that up. And it's all mirrored over to the other side. Okay, so now we're ready to bring out little arms of our character. So it'll become a little bit easier because we only have to do it on one side, and we'll see it body overall. So we're going to jump back to object mode. Remember, we can hit tab as well. If we don't have it selected, we can select that and we can just move it straight up so it's kind of sitting on the ground. We can jump back into edit mode, and then we go to points, and let's come to wireframe. I'm just going to select all of those and kind of move this down a little bit. And let's grab this one and kind of move this up. So he's got kind of a little bit of a bump there. And let's actually move this up a little bit more. And we can start to even select, some of these points, move those down a little, and just give his body a little bit more shape. Now here, I want to take this whole head and just move it up a little bit. So give it a little bit more room here. Okay. And then I want to come in and add a few more loops in here. So we'll use Control R to add a new loop kind of right in there. And we can kind of move this up a little bit. Come in here and kind of move that. And I do want to have a little bit more of a line right there so it's not completely smooth. So I'll hit Control R again, and let's add one kind of right down there. I'll kind of move this one down a little bit. Okay. Now we want to be able to, we don't want this to be so low res. Our end result we want to be smooth, so we can actually add another modifier. So we'll go back to object mode. You can see our mirror modifier here. We can minimize that and see it's still active. We can turn off the modifier just by hitting the little eye icon there. Let's add another modifier. This time we'll add a subdivision surface. And you can see we can set the subdivisions in the view and the render. Right now we're just concerned about the view, so we can make this nice and smooth. And it shows you what that'll look like. You can turn off the effect of it by hitting the little eye. But then you can kind of get an idea, okay, I need to add a little bit more shape to this. So we can go to edit mode, and you can see that the kind of framework is right there. So I can come in and grab just those points there. And maybe I want to have, these points come more down to the ground a little bit. Let me deselect those. And then maybe right here, these will kind of come down. So we can really start to, add a little bit of shape. If we want to come in and add another loop, we can see how that kind of tightens up the shape of it. So we get a nice stylized sort of shape. We can do the same thing here. Okay, and at any time we can turn off that eye, and it just deactivates that temporarily. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to pull out some sort of arms for this character. So it kind of some front arms that'll kind of come out and kind of sit on the floor, so we can kind of decide where we want those to come from. I want them to come from a nice square polygon. So I'm thinking something along the lines of kind of right in here. Now, if we want this to be nice and tight when we smooth it, we want to make sure that there's a loop going around before we actually extrude it out. So in this case, I would hit I first to do a little bit of an inset. And then we could hit E and start to extrude this out. And kind of bring this down. Okay, we can kind of rotate it. If we hit R, that'll allow us to rotate, or we can hit this little icon here, and then we can use each axis to rotate. S will allow us to scale this down. And then if we hit E again, we can do another extrude, and you can see that arm extending over on the other side. Okay, and here we can kind of scale that up a little and rotate it. Let's hit E again and extrude it down. And it's starting to get kind of right down on the ground there. So we can start to get something like that. Now we can start to look at making this foot a little bit bigger, so we can kind of take these polygons right out here. And we want to extrude them. Remember though, we want to extrude this time along the vertex normal to pull it out along the normals. So we can do kind of something like that. Now I'd like to extrude out some individual toes. So if we do extrude individual, that will allow us to extrude each of these faces individually. Then we can come in here and kind of scale those down a little bit. And then we can grab, if you want to grab each individual face, let's actually do that. Just grab the face. And then we can kind of pull it forward. And we can come in here and kind of scale it down a little bit. And we can do the same thing here and here. And then anytime we do this, it's probably a good idea to come in and start to kind of move the points around. So just spend a little bit of time adding some, giving some love to this. So we can kind of pull this down. We want it to be kind of flat on the ground. And then we can also come in here, grab these points and start to pull those down so it's nice and smooth. The transition is. Okay, just spend a little time with that. Now when we smooth it, this is going to be, let's go back to object mode. This is going to be really smooth right here. And so if we want to actually see a little bit of that elbow, then we want to make sure to add extra edges there. So here we can come in and let's go into Wireframe. And we can select our points. If we go into edit mode. Let's hit S and we'll just kind of scale this down. Control R. And I'm just going to add a couple of edges on either side of that. So it allows us to bend it. If we want to add a little bit more shape to the arm, we can come in here and add that in. And then hit S really quickly to kind of scale it. And we can do the same thing down here. Click, drag it into position, S to kind of scale it. Go back to object mode and we can kind of see that. Okay? And then if you want to kind of define those feet a little bit better, let's come into edit mode. If you want to make the feet a little bit flatter, when you add edges close to other edges, when you smooth it, it serves to kind of tighten that up. So you can see now it's kind of flat there. Okay, if you wanted to kind of tighten up the shape of it, you can add those edges in. And you could do the same thing here. If you want to tighten up the kind of this area, so it's not so soft, you could come in here and add an edge right in there. And you can see that that sort of tightens things up. Okay, so spend a little bit of time tweaking your little arms there. And then in the next